Hi, my name is Marianne Possberg. I'm the Beef Production Specialist for the Saskatchewan Cattlemen's Association. And I'm going to talk a little bit about foot and mouth disease and the trip that I took to Uganda in 2020, right at the beginning of 2020, and how it helped me understand the disease and how it would affect Canada. So I was sent there by the Animal Health Emergency Management Group. They're a group that is trying to coordinate better emergency response and preparation in Canada for animal and livestock groups. Before leaving for Uganda, they did set up some courses for me to take, and it helped me understand how to detect lesions, how to age lesions, what the proper tests would be for those lesions, depending on the age and how long that animal has been infected, and what kind of advice would be appropriate to producers and other folks in the livestock and surrounding areas. You might wonder, what is foot and mouth disease? So as you can see, it causes a lot of pain for the animals. You can see there it's causing foam around the mouth, and that's because they've got lesions in the mouth that they're trying to deal with. It does affect cattle, goats, pigs, and other hooved animals. Not horses, but if they have a split in their hooves, that disease will affect them. It does cause some pretty long-lasting effects on the health, which also causes a loss of production in the short term and the long term because they become chronics. It is pretty difficult to eradicate. Once an animal has it, it can be spread through the air, through eating food that others that have been infected have eaten, water bowls and other things like that. And that's the reason why it's also a reportable disease. And by that, I mean, if it's found in Canada and if it's found in a large enough serious case, then it would cut us off from trade. So just to ensure that everybody knows what to look for, we've got some pretty painful blister-like sores, as you'll see in this slide. There's a lot of limping, constant chewing and foaming of the mouth that you saw in the last video or last slide. There's a drop in milk production. The animals get pretty skinny, pretty anorexic looking. They have lameness, there's fever, abortions when in early gestation. You would also see mastitis and depression, and then of course sudden death in young animals. So if you've got a few of these symptoms roaming around on your farm, it's a good idea to call your vet or maybe take a peek yourself if you can, just to rule it out. So then the question is, why would I go to the other side of the world to study foot and mouth disease? Well, it helped me understand how an outbreak in another country would affect Canada if it happened, that outbreak happened in Canada, and how it would affect our industry. So it also helped me and allowed me to talk to other people from other countries. So it wasn't just Ugandans, it was also people from the United Kingdom and Americans, to understand how they would manage it in their countries, and in the case of the UK, how they have managed some of the outbreaks and the cases in their country. It also helped me understand how it took a while for the cases to be managed in the UK, as they aren't integrated and move around animals as much as we do. So if they had that problem in the UK and they're not moving around animals as much in that country, how much would it affect Canada, considering that we do? So just a little bit of a background about Uganda. It's had foot and mouth disease since the 1950s, and it's had to deal with a number of factors that could help us understand what kind of ramifications it could create for Canada if it happened here. As you'll see in the map, they deal with a few different borders. South Sudan, Kenya, Congo, Rwanda is underneath there as well. And their borders can be porous at times. They've also got varying cultures, including the Maasai, which is a nomadic group of people who, among other things do a lot of herding of cattle through the corridor there too. So that can spread the disease from time to time as well. They have had a lot of cases of foot and mouth disease since the 1950s, and in fact there were 3 cases by the time I had arrived in early February of 2020. So those are different problems that they have in their country, but consider that we also have a lot of movement of cattle through Canada, a lot of movement of livestock through Canada. Different areas of Canada have different ways of managing their livestock. And we don't just have cow-calf producers, we also have backgrounders and finishers where we move cattle around to, in which there is a larger density of animals that would get the disease if they were potentially around another infected animal. So to keep this disease out, or to minimize it, we're going to have to work together the same way that they're attempting to do in Uganda, because we could fail similarly to Uganda as well. So if we have an opportunistic farmer that says, oh, okay, I know that this area of Canada, which has been closed off, has infected animals, but if I could buy one of those animals, they're selling it really cheap, and take it back to my farm, you know, I'm sure it doesn't have foot and mouth disease, so it'll be fine. Well, sometimes it does, and then that can spread the infection to other areas. So we do have to work together at this. And I should also note that there have been countries that have been free of foot and mouth disease before, and they've still gotten the disease. It still spreads to those countries. So we can see in the green slide on the one to the right, there are an awful lot of countries that are foot and mouth disease free. But those red spots note all of the cases that were still detected between 1992 and 2003. So you'll see quite a few of them there. And one of the most striking findings was that there is a disparity in the number of cases of diseases. So most of the problems, or most of the cases that you'll find, were actually fairly small. They had a lot less than 2,000 cases. But when it comes to the UK, Uruguay, Argentina, and Taiwan, they had upwards of 2,000 cases. And I should say a case is not just one animal, it's a detection of the disease on a farm, so it could be quite a few more animals. So the scary thing that the factors associated with each of these larger outbreaks was that there was a lot of commingling, there's a lot of high density, there was delayed detection, and there was also an ineffective response. So what do I think of looking at the research of major foot and mouth disease outbreaks, which could happen in Canada as well? Well, first of all, that they do happen, as I've just noted, but also that there are a lot of those common factors that we're seeing in previous, or in the other countries in the previous slide, that could happen here. So commingling, there's a lot of open range in BC with a lot of animals who share fence lines. There's a lot of community pastures in the prairies, and there are auction marts throughout Canada. There's a lot of high density livestock areas. So there's the dairies in BC, there's the feedlots in southern Alberta, the pork barns in southeastern Manitoba, the Golden Triangle, lower Quebec, Annapolis Valley. All of those have a lot of animals in one place. Delayed detection, well, that could happen because we haven't seen foot and mouth disease in Canada for decades. We don't really know what to look for. So if we see an animal who is limping, we'll probably say, I'm sure that they've got one of the common diseases that we see, and we'll treat them for that, and maybe we won't think it's a large problem. But if we're not looking for the right signs, we might miss it. As far as an ineffective response, though, well, if we haven't prepared for it because we haven't seen it for a very long time, that could lead to a delayed or ineffective response too, which is one of the reasons why the Animal Health Emergency Management Group has been doing its work. But also consider that there are a few more factors in Canada that could contribute to this disease spreading. And that includes a lot of entry points into Canada, a lot of ports, large cities and having livestock here as well. There's a lot of movements throughout Canada on a daily basis. Our livestock operations, even if you've got a cow-calf operation, you're usually looking at a small one, but there's some larger ones there, 200, 500, 700 animals all at once. And then of course there's feedlots and pork barns and other larger operations that we need. There's a lot of daily logistics that would have to be shut down and would be very difficult to shut down. So we have a daily trucking of animals across Canada going to packing plants, going to feedlots, and so on. And I'm not sure our biosecurity is very strong throughout the system. There are certainly people doing a lot of work in this area, but not all farms have biosecure farms. But also consider that prevention is easier than vaccines. So I've heard from people saying, well, if we get it, we'll vaccinate our way out of it, it'll be fine. Not quite. And that's because there's more than one type of foot and mouth disease, and in fact there's 7. Vaccinating for one is not going to give you the protection for the other 6. And the vaccines don't last very long. They only last for a couple of years. So we can't vaccinate all of our animals for 7 different types of foot and mouth disease every 2 years. And like tuberculosis, bovine tuberculosis, a test for foot and mouth disease will have a positive disease result when they might be tested at the borders or at packing plants. So you can't really differentiate the ones that have been vaccinated and the ones that actually have the disease. And then there's a quality assurance problem for those vaccines. They're very sensitive, they're very difficult to manufacture, so they have to be done right, and that takes time. And then on top of it, because it takes a long time for these vaccines to be developed, they can't be done on a dot. So there are some vaccine banks, but they can't keep enough for all of the livestock in Canada. So there are ongoing discussions from the Canadian Cattlemen's Association and the government to develop a vaccine bank that will work for us. So you might wonder, what are we doing to kind of deal with foot and mouth disease in the province, in Canada, and what can you do as well? Well, the Saskatchewan Cattlemen's Association is working with the AHEM group to develop a workbook for Saskatchewan producers and to also develop a workbook for our organization and have an emergency management plan. And we intend on continuing to work with them so that we can have scenarios and practice emergency situations. The Canadian Cattlemen's Association is also working with the AHEM group, and they're working with the federal government to increase the supply of reliable vaccines that I've just talked about. And as far as what you can do, you can visit the AHEM project website for their workbook, and that's at animalhealth.ca, and look for your provincial species-specific workbook. I would suggest that you review that plan annually and ask your vet if they've also participated in the foot and mouth disease training course as well that AHEM provides. So as a last little note there, when I came back from Uganda, I wrote that I went to a farm that was infected with foot and mouth disease, and I said that I was going to quarantine. I kind of swore that I was going to in the little checklist that you get, and then when I went through the border, they let me go without a problem. So consider that it could be very easy for somebody to lie about that, and consider how you can ensure that your animals don't get foot and mouth disease and how you can ensure that it wouldn't spread across Canada. So thanks very much for your time. I hope that you found this video helpful.